Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank you for your time that you've given up today to be part of this presentation. We appreciate that teachers are very busy people with planning and preparation, so thank you very much for attending. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Tanya McPherson. I am the Rural and Regional Access Coordinator of the Wimmera Southwest. I'm also joined today by Sarah McEwen and Tom Hortop, and I'm going to hand over to them while they introduce themselves. But while they are introducing themselves, if you are happy to write your name in the chat function, you can see the chat function indicated on this slide, your role and where you teach, that would be great.
Thanks, Tom Hall. I'm the leadership partner working in Brimbank, Milton.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah McEwen. I'm a PLC practice instructor for Western Melbourne. Hand you back to Tanya.
Thank you. We also have other SOLS team members for the Literacy 3 to 6 team, and they are Matthew Beachy, Emma Castello, Han Pittman, Julian Bradford, and of course Meredith Patterson, and we thank them very much for attending today also. Great to see people putting their names and schools and their roles in the chat function, and I suggest you continue to do so. Fantastic. Just a few protocols to go through for this meeting today, just so that it runs nice and smoothly. When you're not speaking, if you could have your microphone on mute, please. It just stops the background noise from.
Audio, Tanya.
Thank you. I was busy presenting with no mic on then, so apologies to everyone.
Only about 10 seconds.
That's all right. Just a few protocols to go through today. When you are not speaking, could you have your microphones on mute, please? And it just stops that background noise from coming through. We will have some opportunities for you to participate today, and Tom will be handling the chat. So he'll be, if you've got any questions, please put those into the chat function, and he will stop the presentation and we can answer those questions along the way. If your video conference is poor, we're happy for you to turn off your video and just continue with the audio, and that just helps you with your bandwidth. We would encourage you to engage and interact with the activities provided to get the most out of them from this session. And just a reminder that Sarah did mention that this is being recorded, so if you don't wish to be a part of the recording, could you please turn your videos off? And welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for putting your names and schools in the chat function. Just like we would in the classroom, we decided to start off our professional learning with a warm-up activity. So I think most of you will recognise the Bunnings paint chart. And so we've just started off with a really simple activity that engages all learners. So it's differentiated so that all children can participate. So we've got a very simple sight word such as run and pretty, and we've put it in the top banner of the paint chart. And then we've tried to tier the language with more sophisticated word choices. And hopefully the final word choice is the most sophisticated word choice. So we've got run, dash, barrel, sprint, pretty, lovely, beautiful and stunning. And to start this activity, we hoped once again that you would use the chat function. I'm wondering if you could put in a more sophisticated word choice for the word sad. Tom's going to track that as we go along. So Deanne's fast.
I already would have to be the highest tier ones with morose and melancholy. The gold coming in today is somber and bereft.
I hope that's not the feeling of the crowd today.
You've really set the tone, Tanya.
I think we should have chose something more positive, maybe. Miserable. All right, and you can see that this can be done both in the classroom or remote learning. It was a very simple activity. I just got the Bunnings paint chart, copy and pasted it, and then I put a text box in really easily, and then just provided a work sample for the children to use. But back in the classroom, of course, you could do exactly the same thing by going out to Bunnings and grabbing as many paint charts as you possibly can during that time. Our purpose for today's activity is to explore differentiated learning for students in all learning contexts using deep resources. We're totally aware that the past 5 weeks have been all about remote learning, and now we're transitioning back into classroom practice again. So it's important that the differentiated learning is accommodating for both remote learning and classroom practice. We hope that you have some takeaways at the end of this session. We hope that your takeaways include the online learning resources for differentiation and some ideas about how to use platforms to support high quality differentiated teaching and learning. So we wanted to give you the opportunity to think about what does differentiation look like in your setting along with your general classroom practice. So we'd like you to have a think about what are you currently doing and what did you do before remote teaching? And if you are willing to, and we do give you the right to pass in this instance, if you're happy to share your current practice in the chat, please. Once again, Tom's going to monitor that for us. Great. Google Classroom is a great resource for differentiation, and Sarah's going to talk about Google Classroom a little bit during this presentation as well.
So obviously, it's been for many schools.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll be touching on that at some point later on about varying the success criteria for this or tiering them.
All right. Thank you to those. Group conferences, common topics, different handouts for reading. Fantastic. Reading Eggs, another great example. Fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate your contribution. So it's great to see that many of the things that were in the chat actually apply to this definition of differentiation. So differentiation is a proactively planned approach to what students need to learn, how they will learn it, and how they can express what they have learned. And we all know that we all have classrooms of anywhere between 17 and 25. Differentiation is often one of the main bugbears that we question and think about during our daily teaching routine. And it's no different remotely or whether in the classroom. It's important to remember that assessment is key to differentiation, and it certainly drives our future teaching and learning. The next slide that we're going to show is all about different methods that teachers can use to show their knowledge and skills for differentiation for every student. It's important to recognise that differentiated learning is when teachers think creatively and flexibly, and it provides the right amount of challenge for children and of course promotes engagement. And I think engagement has been one of the difficulties in remote learning, whether it's due to online practices or not enough resources as in iPads and computers and so forth. But what we wanted you to do here, rather than me talk to this slide, we wanted to give you the opportunity to have a read of this slide. And then we want you to just put 2 numbers in the chat. The first number will be something that you're doing really well in differentiation. The second number will be something that you want to work towards. So something that you would like to do better. I'm going to stop talking because I hate it when people talk while I'm trying to read. Fiona, I'm just going to speak again to see whether you've got sound. I have got my speaker on this time. Fantastic. Thanks for your contribution. 1 and 2 is a suggestion. 1 being I'm doing really well. 2, I'd like to adjust the pace of instruction. 6 is a common number coming through there for things that they'd like to do better, provide feedback in different types of pre and post assessment. Fantastic.
There's some from a lot of schools reporting that, particularly under the current conditions. Feedback's been an area where people feel like they're being swamped or trying to find a more efficient way of doing it. So you're not alone.
It's a very common conversation, isn't it, Tom, that people are talking about the overwhelming response to give feedback throughout the day, and that's really time consuming when you've got 25, 26 children in the classroom. Fantastic. I will just let you know that this, because this is being recorded, you will have access to these slides, so you'll be able to access this graphic organizer for you during a time that suits yourself. So moving on, remote and flexible learning. The Remote and Flexible Effective Practice document was created through significant research in the area of online learning by Deakin University. There were 7 elements of effective practice recognised during this time, and we're going to talk about 3 of these today. We're going to talk about challenge, relevance, and personalisation. I think Tom's going to put the link to this document in the chat, and it can be saved as simply as going File, Save, Chat, and you can save it to your desktop wherever you like. So why is differentiation important for both flexible and classroom teaching? Well, we're all teachers and we all know that human moments and that the relationships with students is vitally important. So finding the human moments enables the relationship to become the core of all learning. So understanding how our students think, ways in which they learn, getting to know them as little human beings in our classroom still applies remotely or whether in the classroom. Challenge continues to be important both remotely or in the classroom once again because children like to delve into new learning. And we used to call it the learning pit in my classroom, where children had the opportunity to go into the learning pit and come out the other side with new understanding. So providing the right amount of challenge is really important, both remotely and in a classroom practice. And of course, relevance. I think the most important thing that we could recognise here is that our children are our best critics, and they know when something is authentic and whether it's purposeful and whether it's useful. And that's really important to recognise during this time. So just providing that authentic task that provides the right kind of challenge with the child in mind continues to be at the forefront of our minds during this time. I'm going to hand over to Sarah.
Thanks, Tanya. I'm just going to go through a couple of digital resources and some tips and tricks that are available to support your students. Obviously, you can use them in this online learning environment, but all of these can be taken back into the classroom and can help your learners become a little bit more independent, perhaps, in their learning in the classroom. So I've got an example there of a few things that are available for you, starting with ClickView, which is a digital collection of videos that you can have access to that and I know we've talked about ClickView in some of our other presentations. It can have interactive content where the students input information into the videos as well, and students can create their own videos from there as well. And you can create your own as well. So that's one of the resources. You can access content to be able to support your students at all of their different levels. I'm going to look into a few news providers that you can use in the classroom and also some other text providers online. The reason why is because one of the ways to differentiate is the type of text that you're putting in front of your students. So I'm going to look first at these 2 different news providers. Newsella is an American news provider, so just keep that in mind when you are going to use it. And it has news articles that can be accessed at a number of different levels, from 4 to 5 levels per news article, and that's the same news articles. So you can see in this screenshot, I've just clicked on this button up here, and it shows different Lexile levels. So you can access that same text about horses at a range of different levels, which could be really good to have a whole class conversation where everyone's been able to access that text from their own level. It does come with some quizzes and some writing prompts and some vocabulary work with each of the articles as well. And you can assign them to one particular student, to a group of students, or you can assign it to your whole class as well. Kids News is an Australian news provider that has news presented in kid-friendly terms, and it has 3 different levels labelled green, orange and red. They don't have the same text available at all 3 different levels. They have a range of news articles at the green level, a different range at orange and a different range at red. And they also come with some learning tools to support the articles as well. I'm going to have a walk with you through Epic, but I want you to keep in mind Epic and Whooshkaa, and there's a range of other text provider platforms online. They're very, very similar. So I'm just going to show you inside Epic, and Epic has the ability to search for text via F&P level, which can be really useful, or you can explore via grade level over here as well. It has got some extra supports like the read to me function where the text can be narrated, and also some audiobooks where it's purely the audio. One thing to note in Whooshkaa, the narrator is actually an Australian voice, which is a nice little feature as well. And again, you can assign text to either one student, or you can assign it to a group of students, or you can assign it to your whole class. And you can keep track of your students' reading by looking at how many minutes they've read a particular book, where they're up to in the text, how they're going on their comprehension quizzes that are attached to the text, and things like that. At a few other things that we can use for differentiation. Of course, we've got our rubrics here. Now, I know that's quite a small picture. We didn't actually pop it there for you to be able to read the text, more just to highlight. Rubrics are a really good way to allow access point for a whole range of students and being able to put that success criteria gradually in the different levels. Using a blog is something I know a few teachers have been able to use, where they've assigned students to a group and then been able to put group work up on that blog for different students to access. In the online environment, having small group conferences via WebEx is a really good way to get some of that differentiation in that focused teaching. What some people have been doing is having their whole class meeting in the morning and then pulling just that small group out at the end to stay back to have that focus group. And it's a good idea. I know someone said they were sending a timetable of that back to the parents so that they knew exactly when students were going to be met with. These couple of platforms we've got here, which we did see mentioned earlier in the chat, Google Classroom and Seesaw. I know there is a whole range of other platforms as well. We're going to just have a quick talk about these two, and most of the other platforms have very similar features. So Seesaw, starting with, has the ability to assign tasks to students, and there's a whole library of activities on Seesaw, ready-made, ready to go, that you can assign to, again, one student or a group of students or your whole class. And students can have a range of functionality within Seesaw, like to annotate over the top of things, to add voice recordings and video and all sorts of things like that. And a quick and easy way to provide feedback via the comments in Seesaw. Now, Google Classroom as a platform has the ability to send out tasks as well. I'm actually going to just click out of this screen so that I can take you to a Google Classroom. Here we are. This is a Google Classroom I've set up. So in this classroom, I've got our stream at the front, which is where we would have just our normal chat and check-in times. And then in the classwork section, I've got week 6 here. I'm going to click onto this metaphor task and just show us what we can do here. It's been a bit slow for me. Hopefully that will come up. And the task for this one is actually just a Google slide, which looks just like this. There's a little bit of text, and the students are going to try and explain the use of metaphor that's in that passage. So that activity I've assigned here with the instructions there. And just one of the things that we can keep in mind when we're pushing things out on these platforms is we have the ability to attach lots of things to either support or extend our learners. So in this section here where it says add, we've got a range of things we can add, and I'll show you some of the things I have added to this task. So we could add a YouTube video which has some explicit teaching or some reminders around what metaphors are or whatever your content is. So you can see I've actually attached a YouTube video there. We can add a link to something like a click view click view video that could either support my more vulnerable learners, or it could really create that extension opportunity for my high flyers. And I think I have one of those attached just under here. There's no limit to the amount of attachments you can have on a task. You can also attach a file from your desktop if you want that there, like a Word document and things. And I've attached a Word document there, which just has some sentence starters to support the language abilities of some of my more vulnerable students, or possibly EAL students in that environment. So just keeping in mind that that is there, and you can, similar to all the other things, either send that out to one student, a group of students, or to your whole class. Now, the list of attachments could be different for different students. If you send that task out to the whole class, but you might separate how many people get different attachments. One little thing there. Let me come back to our PowerPoint. I'm going to show you a few other tips and tricks. Again, I'm going to have to pop out of this screen to be able to show you these things because they're all using different platforms. But I'm going to show you using the Microsoft Read Aloud and Dictate tools. We're going to look at Mote, which is a Google Chrome extension, and the audio to text in the Google Suite. We're going to explore some graphic organizers and also have a look at Vocaroo. But to do all of this, I need to leave this PowerPoint again. If you have any questions, or if I'm moving quickly, please pop your details or questions into the chat. Tom's doing a great job of managing that there. And Tom can let me know if you need me to slow down. All right, first of all, I'm going to go into Microsoft Word, and we're going to have a look at some of the tools that are available in here. So there is a learning suite available in here. So if we come up to View, which is up here, and you'll find your learning tools menu over here. You can click on that one. One of the lovely things here is just this read aloud. So if you've got a document that's a Word document and your students are struggling to read the instructions, they can just find this tool.
Finish these sentences. The fire is being compared to.
I'll stop that there. And there's a little menu system over here. If you click on that, you can see we can adjust the reading speed and make it faster or slower. Also, if you're not a big fan of Microsoft James, you can change that to Microsoft Catherine and read that in
Finish these
voice.
sentences. The fire is being compared to.
I'll pause that. We don't need Microsoft Catherine to read the whole thing to us. So that's one of the things that's available in this learning tools. Another one is breaking the words into syllables. So no matter how long your text is, you can just click that button and it'll break all your text up into syllables, putting that little dot in between each syllable, which can just give that extra support to some of your readers. I'll turn that off. Another thing is our text spacing. Again, doesn't matter how long it is. If you just click the button, it'll space it right out for you, making it a bit visually easier. And we've got our line focus here, where we can focus on 1, 3, or 5 lines at a time. Just blocks out the rest of the text, really honing in on those smaller details. We'll open that up to 3 lines and 5 lines. Now you can change the page color if that's of use to your students as well, and your column width if you're using columns. So that's some of the learning tools. If we come out of that, one of the other things that your students might like to use is this dictate feature over here. So when we click on that, the computer will take over and turn my voice into text on the screen, full stop. You do have to add the punctuation, comma, as I'm just showing you, full stop. There we go. So hopefully you get the idea there. It does work quite quickly. There are sometimes it pops up with a few errors that didn't predict quite so well what I was saying, but I've had pretty good luck with it so far. So that's some of the features that are in Microsoft. All right, I'm going to have a look at the website Vocaroo for you next. I just need to come out of there. This is Vocaroo. It's a very simple website, as you can see. There's not much on there. And what it does is just create audio files for you. So you can do really simple voice recordings and share them with your students in a number of ways. So if I click on the red button, it's starting to record my voice now, and it can be as long or as short as I like there. Once I stop, I have my sharing options. I can share it via all the social media options, of course, or I can download it. I can embed it into a website or a Google slide or anything like that, or I can get it as a QR code, which can be really useful for work that's being sent home and printed out on paper. So that there I'd save, and then I can just pop that as an image on any piece of paper that I wanted to send home with instructions. Just as some extra support for those kids. All right, I'm kind of come into, where are we? Come into a Google slide here to show the Mote extension. I've just got some things open here. Mote is this little purple and white squiggle up there, and it's an extension you can get for free from the Google Chrome store. All it does is when you're adding a comment to anything in the Google Suite, so a Google Doc or Google Sheet or Google Slide, it pops up there as an option to record your voice as well. So if I clicking on that, it's now recording my voice, and whatever I want to say to the student, whether it's instructions or reading the text, I can add it here. Click on done. It thinks for a little while, and I add that comment. Now when the student comes in, they'll see this box here, and they can click on the play button and hear the voice. Clicking on that, it's now recording my voice, and you don't really need to hear that again, do we? So I'll leave that there. It has been something that can be speed up your feedback process, as well as help leave those extra little bits of support for your students. Another thing we're going to talk about is graphic organizers. Graphic organizers can be great for supporting your students' thinking and making their thinking visible. I'm going to show you a way to create your own graphic organizers or use them within a Google slide so they can be used digitally. I've started setting this one up already. As you can see, I've just used circles and lines to create the shape. And now that I've got that there, I've left a space down the side to be able to put in my instructions, which I just typed up earlier. There's my instructions for today. They're going to use this graphic organizer for adjectival phrases about the topic of their backyard. Problem with this is the kids can come in and manipulate this and change it and really mess it up for me. So one of the tips you can do is once you've got everything on your graphic organizer that you want, you can download that as an image. So we'll download that as a JPEG. And that'll just go into my downloads folder. I'm going to use a new slide here. And instead of inserting the image, I'm actually going to come here to background to change the background. And I'm going to find that image to use as my background. That should be the first one that's in my downloads folder there to make it nice and easy. Everything's just been a little bit slower at the moment. There we go. So now you can see that same image is there, but I can't click on anything because it's the background. Now what I can do is insert text boxes over the top that I want the students to actually input, and I have created those earlier. Ooh, where are we? There we go. Ooh, it doesn't want to come. I did group them all together. Anyway, there we go. Move them over, and I'm not going to spend too much time getting them perfect for you, but I will ungroup them so I can show you now where I've put the words insert text. The student will click on there and then be able to write their own things in that box and submit it through whatever platform you're wanting. That's a little trick you can use to create graphic organizers, and also keeping in mind you can use this space on the sides for items you might want the students to drag and drop on top of your graphic organizer, like this hierarchy chart where they would then decide where the different items go and add them on. All right, one trick there just in Google Slides, when you are setting up your Google Slides, if you want to be able to print them as well, just go to your page setup and go to custom here. Mine's already on custom. Just set it up to A4 size there, and that way you'll be able to use it digitally, but as well as print it out if you wanted to print out your graphic organizers. Come back here. Another way we're going to explore some differentiation is in the instruction that we give in our reading sessions. And I'm going to hand back to Tanya now.
Thanks, Sarah. Following Sarah's sharing of resources, I wanted to walk you through a pedagogy model, including the Victorian teaching and learning, outlined by the key domains of effective teaching. So you can see during this lesson structure that I use the E5 model of engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And I chose this model for remote learning in particular, but it applies to most instructional models as well. This lesson goes across the week in literacy and it uses a lot of remote learning practices plus classroom practices, but it's differentiated in multiple ways. And although you can't really see the learning intentions, you will see that in a few minutes during a video. The learning intention is differentiated. So the first part of this is, I'll just read it to you because you can't see it. We are learning to summarise longer text. I can understand a simple sequence of events and steps. I can summarise a longer narrative with multiple episodes, and I can identify important ideas in a text and report them in an organised way. So you can see the learning intention and success criteria staggered to allow multiple entry points for students to have success in learning. The second way that this lesson structure for literacy is differentiated is by using the graphic organiser. And if I could just get Sarah to just move it to the next slide for me for 1 minute. Thank you, Dale. The graphic organiser is the same for all students, but the differentiation it will be when the students come in with the multiple entry points using their success criteria and their expectations of work. The third way that this is differentiated is by using the resources. And just as Sarah had shown a little earlier, I used resources such as Wooshka and Epic because they certainly sat alongside remote learning very easily. So with this reciprocal reading task, there's a different text for each group that matches the learning needs of the students at that point. And then the fourth way that it could be differentiated is by using different models of reading. So I could be using guided reading, reciprocal reading, or conferencing. In this instance, I've used reciprocal reading. But for those interested, in week 5, the F2 SOLS focused on differentiated and reading, and it's well worth watching if you get the opportunity. The next part of this is a video that I've recorded for reciprocal reading, and I wanted to just probably allude to a couple of things. The first thing that I needed to allude to is that the video was recorded during remote learning time, and there were some things that we needed to do to ensure reciprocal reading happened really successfully. And the first one was to revise some key concepts of what reciprocal reading looked like. There were some changes that needed to be made due to the fact that we had children that were not to be recorded, so there were cameras off, and we had to acknowledge those and respect those decisions. So you can see when I show the recording in a few moments, you will see that the children actually adopted a role and stuck to that. Now, we know that that's not usually the way that we would do reciprocal reading, and that we would engage in lots of conversation and multiple roles, but for remote reading, I decided to do it in the way that they stuck to their questioning, clarifying, summarising, or predicting. Another thing that I decided to do was use Wooshka, and you will notice during the recording that I chose not to for the children to read. So we've actually used the resources or the platform available to us, and the text is actually read to the students. And I did that for engagement as much as anything else. So I wanted the children to be aware of the functions that they were using in Wooshka or Epic or whatever device you are using. I did have to promote no hands up, and that was really difficult. I think during remote learning, the children had reverted back to, I need to ask a question, I'll put my hands up, which was really difficult for the child who didn't have her camera on. So there's a couple of things that we needed to do differently, but I just wanted to share that we can do reciprocal reading remotely as we would do back in the classroom. So I'm going to hand back over to Sarah for a few minutes. Our learning intentions today are to summarise longer text. Now, Emily, can you tell me what the learning intention is asking us to do today?
To summarise the important ideas throughout the text.
Fantastic. I'm wondering where you think you'll be working. Do you think you'll be working in success criteria 1, 2, or 3? Put your fingers up to show me. Well done. No, I can see that you're working in 3, and so is Maya. Well done. Emily's verging between 2 and 3, which is super fine. Well done. All right. Because we are working remotely today, I thought it was going to be easier that I actually play the story rather than us do shared reading. So I'm going to actually put the audio on so that you can hear the story. I'm just going to clarify your roles. Noah, your role is?
Summarizer.
Kimber?
Predictor.
Emily?
Clarifier.
Maisie?
I'm the questioner.
And Miss Mayer?
Discussioner.
Fantastic. So I'm going to play a little bit. I'm just going to do a real small paragraph to start off with, and then Maya, I'm going to throw to you, and I'm going to ask you to guide the conversation in our reciprocal reading task today. All right, you ready?
Introduction, 21st of May, 32. In a field beside a tiny village, a farmer hears the droning noise of an engine filling the air. The farmer stops and looks up. A small airplane is swooping in toward the field, flying lower and lower until its wheels touch the ground. It jolts along and shudders to a stop.
All right, I've just listened to a short amount. Maya, can I throw over to you, please, because you're the discussion director.
Yep. So, Noah, what have you written down so far, or do you need a little more time to write them down? No, I'm good. So, on the 21st of May, 1932, a plane was across this gentleman's house, and he went outside to see it, and it was coming closer and closer to the ground. All right. Maisie, would you like to question anything? Okay, so I don't have anything to question. Okay, Emily, would you like to clarify any words or anything like that?
Yes, I'd like to clarify droning.
Oh, good one. I was wondering about that one too, Emily. Well done. Does anyone, if we reread the sentence, do we think that we can work out what droning means? Let's have a look at it. In a field beside a tiny village, a farmer hears the droning noise of an engine filling the air. Sorry, Maya, we don't have to have hands up here. You can actually, if you unmute yourself, that's super fine.
So it's probably like the propellers on the plane spinning round. It's probably the noise from that.
Great. Maisie?
I think it's droning might mean like the way it's sort of circling and the noise it's making.
Right. What about you, Noah? I reckon you'd have a great droning noise.
I bet it might. Well, I don't have a droning noise, but I do know what droning means.
Go.
So what the author is trying to say here is that this book would have been created around the 2000s. So drones would have been invented, and they were probably describing it as that sometimes annoying sound where, like, if your brothers get a drone for their birthday when you're trying to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, you just hear.
That's fantastic, Noel. Well done. Great explanation. Over to you, Maya.
So who's next? Finbar, would you like to say any predictions that you might have?
I've got 2 predictions.
Okay.
I predict that the farmer will see Amelia Earhart when she comes out of the plane and will greet her. And the next one is, I predict that Amelia is stopping fuel but decides to stay after she hears how fast she goes.
Excellent. Well done. How'd you get your prediction, Finbar?
I looked at the text after I heard it, and I was looking very closely to see if there was anything I was curious about.
That's awesome. Thank you, Finbar.
That's all right.
Maya, has everyone had a roll?
Yes.
Okay, ready to play on. I did stop it there because it did go on a little bit further, but you can see the engagement of the children, I think, which is, you know, so vitally important. I don't know whether anyone noticed at the start of the session when my little boy Noah was madly note-taking because he knew that he was a summariser. So you can see the engagement that the children had during the reciprocal reading. And considering that this is the second or third reciprocal reading, you can see that it would get much, much better as the children got more comfortable with remote learning in particular. But the other thing that I wanted to celebrate is that gradual release model. You can see that really the children were in the hot seat. It wasn't the teacher guiding the discussion. It was actually the children who were doing the discussion during this time. So from a teaching perspective, I'm very proud of the effort that the children put in during this time. Over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya. One of the things we wanted to point out was this was reciprocal teaching. If you're wanting to have a look at either guided reading or shared reading, there is some information about those in the F2 recordings that are available in the website. So check those out there because it is one of the ways we differentiate is the style of instruction we offer. I'm just going to pop in another example of something we can do with our kiddos. Here we are. So just popping some text up here on the screen. I've got my question here about what can we infer by looking at a character's actions. And within WebEx here, I'm just going to turn on the annotate tool. On the left-hand side of your screen, there should be a little annotate menu. I'll let a few people request annotation access. If you're in a classroom or working with a small group, you could give everyone annotation access. Otherwise, you could just assign it to 1 or 2 kids at a time. If anyone else wants to request annotation access, please do so. I've done 2 so far. It can be handy to have a few people jump in. Thank you. There we go. I won't give everyone annotation access because it'll go a bit crazy, but I think I've got 3 or 4 people on there at the moment, which is great. So asking the students to underline the verbs that are relating to Mr. Murray and then being able to have a discussion around those verbs. Again, if you're in the classroom or with a small group, you would have the discussion, you could have it verbally, so unmuting the students like we saw in the last video. With this many people, we would be using the chat feature. So if we look at the verbs that we've highlighted, Mr. Murray, he turned and ran, he was flapping around, he glanced desperately, he cried, he was prancing, he was flapping, bumping the lady, grabbed, dumped, so that's quite, or slapped, thank you. There's a few there. What do we infer? So using those as clues, what does it tell us about Mr. Murray? And you can pop your ideas in the chat feature at the side there. Now this task or similar task can be differentiated very simply just by the type of text that you're putting up there in front of the kids and the level of vocabulary that you're exposing them to as well. So whether it's one sentence, a paragraph, or as this is a page of the text. Some good ideas there about what we're inferring from Mr. Murray, which is great. All right. I'm going to ask you to just have a reflect on some of the things that you've seen today. I'll turn that annotation tool off for us. Have a reflect on some of the tools that you've seen today and think about something that you would be able to try that you might not have tried before. Something if you need the next level of support that you think you might need with differentiation, or also any further questions you have, whether they're around differentiation or around another topic, please pop them in the Google Doc that should be in the chat, I think, as we speak. Hopefully Tom's popped that there for you. We do have 2 Google Docs open. One is from A to L. So if your surname begins from A to L, if you can enter into that one, and if your surname is from M to Z, if you can enter into that one, it'll just reduce the traffic load and make the document work a little bit quicker for you. Give you a few minutes to pop into that. Fiancine, you don't have access. If you want to request access, I'll pop out of this screen and see if I can make sure you've got access. It is open to anyone who has the link, so I'm not quite sure.
I'll just the settings carried over from the old document and copy it.
Yeah, thanks. That's denying me access too.
Yeah, it's not back. This one, so I'll just go and settings.
Thanks, Tom. While Tom's just sorting that out, if anyone else is having problems there, oh, looks like it's a bit slow. Okay, while we're working that out, I'll just, if anyone has any questions or queries that they want answered and you already have a contact from the SOLS group, please feel free to email them anything you like. If you are new to the SOLS group and haven't had contact from somebody, you can feel free to contact Meredy, and I'll pop her address up there. Meredy is the leader for the 3 to 6 SOLS. Or if you've got any questions relating to today's presentation, you can, of course, email Tanya, Tom, or myself. How are we going there, Tom?
Sorry, it's ground to a halt. My computer's barely moving, so I'm running into a few troubles here. We might have to just send the link across, and settings can be changed. Apologies for that.
All right, that's okay. We'll send you the link once we work out why that's not working right now. We'll send that link through to you. And right now, if you want to save the chat and any of the details that have been provided in the chat, you can go up to your file menu, which will be at the top of your screen at the top left, and then press on save, which will open up another menu, and you can save chat as, and that'll save the transcript there onto your desktop. And that way you'll have all those links. I'd like to thank everybody for coming today, and thank you very much for your contributions to the chat. It's really good when you get involved and we can hear from each other. So thanks very much for coming. If you want to leave the meeting, down the bottom of your screen you will see an X, a red X. You can press on the X and that will make sure you leave the meeting and make sure your video is turned off.